All right. Section 4.2, solving inequalities by using addition and subtraction. So this probably looks familiar to you. This was the same steps we used to solve equations back in chapter 3. Simplify each side. That was something we did when we had big fat fractions. We'd clear those fractions. We would distribute to get rid of parentheses, and we'd combine like terms, none of which you'll have to do today. Those are what we do for two-step equations next week. Today, we're going to focus on, like we did back in chapter 3, the first thing we're going to do is add and subtract from both sides. Okay, so that's where we're going to focus today. Tomorrow, we're going to be multiplying and dividing, and there is an extra step for multiplying and dividing to solve inequalities. And that's when you multiply or divide by a negative number. When you multiply and divide by a negative number to both sides, you have to flip the inequality sign, and I'll explain why we do that tomorrow. Not something we'll have to worry about today, because today we're focusing right here on this step, separating the variable and constant terms by adding and subtracting. So we'll jump right into it. How do I do that? Well, to solve an addition or subtraction inequality, I'm going to treat it just like I do equations. Solve addition or subtraction inequalities just like we do equations. That means when we see a problem like example A, pretend there's an equal sign there and think about what you would do to solve this if it were an equation. Hunter, A minus 5 is less than negative 3. What number would I need to get rid of so A can be by itself? And how do I get rid of a negative 5? Opposite is, there we go. So by putting a positive 5 or by adding 5 to both sides, we can eliminate that negative 5, so A is by itself. That's the same thing we did for equations. Hunter, negative 3 and positive 5 join forces or go to war? They go to war. Who wins and by how much? Positives by 2. Okay. So now I graph on my number line. There is not an equal bar. This is just a less than symbol. So I'm not going to use a closed circle around 2. I'm going to use an open circle around 2. Is A bigger or smaller? Smaller. So we're going to shade to the left. The smaller numbers are always on the left. So remember that when you're shading on the number line, when you're graphing all the possible answers that A could be. So A cannot be equal to 2. Don't shade it in. But it is less than 2. Okay, so I know because A is smaller, and again, it doesn't matter if we'll look at the next one, because the next one, the variable is written on the other side of the equation, the inequality. But it doesn't matter what side of the inequality the letter's on. You can still tell that since the sign's opening up away from it, that means A is small, and we always shade to the left when it's a small variable. Now, as to what you would write on your work papers for tonight's homework, you would need to write down the same things you did for equations, meaning you would need to write down the original problem on your paper, what you're doing to both sides underneath, and then your answer. You do not need to write the number line or graph on your work paper. Okay, so I got an example over there on the board. You can see x minus 6 is greater than or equal to negative 9. If that was the question, I would write it down. I'd show my steps both sides. I would write my answer. No graph necessary for the work paper. Just need to graph it on big ideas. I'm not going to make you draw a graph every single time. You spend more time doing that than it takes to solve the problem. Okay. Example B. Negative 15 is less than or equal to negative 6 plus B. Calvin, what number do I need to get rid of so B is by itself? How do I get rid of a negative 6?
Put 6s down.
Okay. Positive 6s, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means I'm going to add 6 to both sides. And that's going to eliminate the negative 6. Now, when I write this, write the B on the right side of the inequality symbol, just like it was before. Calvin, negative 15 and positive 6 go to war or join forces?
War.
Good. Who wins the war?
Negative 15.
Okay, negatives by how much?
9.
There you go. Now, you could rewrite this with the variable on the left side. I noticed that some of you, when I was grading your test, when the variable was on the right side, I noticed that you wrote it back on the left side, and that's fine with equations. It's not as easy with inequalities. And what I mean by that is if you were to turn around and say, well, I don't want to write B on that side. I'm going to write it like this. That's the exact opposite of what we're trying to say. Because one way, the correct way has B being bigger, the sign's opening up towards the B. But if you rewrite it and you don't change that sign, now you're saying B is smaller, and that's the opposite of what you wanted to shade on your graph. Okay, so to demonstrate this, well, I'm gonna pause the video for a second because no one wants to hear me talk for 3 minutes and not see me. Okay, so either of these answers would be acceptable. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not going to write this because that's extra work. You don't have to flip it around so the variable's on the left side to be able to graph it. To be able to graph it, you just have to determine whether B is big or if B is small. So looking at this right now, is B bigger than -9 or smaller than -9? It's bigger, so I'm going to shade to the right. Do I want to use an open or closed circle around -9? Yes, because it can also be equal to -9. So I'm going to close that in. And this means that B can be anything equal or larger than -9. And remember, larger numbers are always on the right side of the number line, even when they don't appear to be. We're dealing with negative numbers here. So if you're thinking, wait a second, -8. -8 is bigger than -9. It's less negative, so it's bigger. Example C. C plus 12 is greater than 8. Natalie, what should I do to get rid of, well, I'm not going to tell you. What number first do I need to get rid of? So I get C by itself. Yes, and what's the opposite of positive 12? So I throw a -12 on both sides. And this means I'm going to be subtracting 12. I like to think of it as a -12 though. Because if I think of it as a -12, when I go over to the right side, I see a positive and a negative number. And Frank, if I see a positive and a negative number, does that mean I am going to go to war or join forces? Go to war. Who wins the war? By how many? Guys, this is a piece of cake. This is easy. This is child's play. Do I use an open or closed circle? It's open around -4. Is C bigger or smaller? C is bigger. Shade to the right. Example D, Maddox, which number do I want to get rid of? Good. How do I get rid of -6? Good. By putting +6 on both sides, that means I'm adding 6. But the reason I don't like to say adding 6 is because if I say that, someone's going to be like, whoa, wait a second, it's already adding. I thought I was supposed to subtract, and that's not what I've taught you. I've taught you to identify what number you want to get rid of, and then put the opposite of that number. So Maddox is right. I do want to put a +6 on both sides, +6, which means I'm adding. Even though it was an adding inequality already, it's because it's a -6 over there I have to get rid of. So Maddox, when you put the -6 on the right side, you've gotten your variable by itself. But am I going to go to war or join forces? Go to war, who wins? By how much? Excellent. That's it. That's all I have to write on my paper. Write the problem down, write your work. And by the way, you can use your calculator on this homework. I just didn't think that anything we were doing to this point really required a calculator, but you're welcome to type -7 + 6 in your calculator. In fact, do you have your calculators with you? Get them out if you got them, because we're going to need them here. And oh, yeah, I think we could use, that would be a good problem right there to use it on. You need to get out of your locker real quick. Bring it with you tomorrow too. Definitely want them tomorrow too. Natalie.
I have 2 calculators of the same exact.
Great. Remember that when we take quizzes and tests, you cannot use your iPad on quizzes and tests. So if the only calculator you're using is the one on the iPad, it's not available to you on quiz and test day. So you need your own. Okay. If you need to borrow one because you don't have one, please grab one out of my basket right there and you can use it for today. Okay. Just make sure you put it back when you're done. Don't take it out of the classroom. Thank you for those of you that have one and brought it with you, like Navion. Navion, are you going to use an open or closed circle around this -1? Good, it is closed. because the equal sign. And Navion, am I seeing that D is bigger or smaller? Are you sure it's opening up away? Smaller? Yeah, it's opening up away from the variable, isn't it? So if D is smaller, we're going to shade to the left. Make sure when you get back to your seat, you've shaded this in on your number line. Yep. Ask yourself, is the variable bigger or smaller? Bigger shade to the right, smaller shade to the left. Example E. 7 plus E is greater than or equal to -4. Izzy, go ahead and take this one for us. Good. And when you do that, the 7's no longer there. And so it's just E. And Izzy, -4 and -7 are going to join forces or go to war? Correct. So how many negatives will it make if they join forces? Perfect. So E is greater than or equal to -11. Remember that when you join forces, you don't switch teams. You stay negative when you're joining. Two negatives do make a positive when you're multiplying and dividing. That's not what we're doing today, though. So now I have to graph it. Andrea, do I want to use an open or closed circle around -11? Good. Is E bigger or smaller? Shade to the right. That's all you have to do. Ask yourself, open or closed circle, and then ask yourself if the variable is bigger or smaller. Joe, could you shut the door for me, please? Andrea, can you explain to anyone who's still not quite sure, why are you using a closed circle here?
Because it's greater and equal.
Correct. Yes, it's got the equal bar. Anytime we have the equal bar, we have to close our circle in because it's also equal to -11. So I have to shade it in. That's part of my answer. Age.
How do you have that?
How do I have what?
Have that laser?
One of the options you can do, I believe, when you're presenting like I am. I don't know if your iPad has to be connected to AirPlay for that to show up or not. Sounds like it does. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Example F. -21 is greater than F minus 4. Whitney, what number am I trying to get rid of? You want to get F by itself, right? So what number would I have to get rid of? So there's nothing on that same side with the F. What kind of 4? Yes. And what's the opposite of -4? Positive 4. Yes. So we are going to add 4 to both sides. That's the opposite of subtracting 4. But I like to think of it as a positive 4 because when I go over to this other side, and we've got F on this side, we can copy F, we can copy the sign down. When I go over to the other side, I like to think of it as positive 4 because then I see a positive and negative, and I know that I'm going to do what? Go to war or join forces? Go to war. Are they different teams? Yes. Okay. Go to war. Who wins the war? Negatives by how many? So without flipping it, leave the F on that side and tell me, is F bigger or smaller? Smaller. Sign's opening up away from the F, right? So F smaller. So that's all I need to know. That tells me what direction I'm going to shade. Do I want to use an open or closed circle, Aaliyah?
Closed.
It doesn't have the equal bar.
Oh, yeah.
Open? Okay. Open, and we said F is smaller, so we shade smaller, shade to the left. You're just all out of sorts right now. I'll give you another chance. I'll have you graph the next one. Okay. But Taylor's going to help me figure out what I need to do on this next one. Taylor, what number am I trying to get rid of, for example, G? Yeah, what kind of 3.8? It's negative, so I'm going to add put a positive 3.8, good. So a plus 3.8 on both sides. If I didn't have a calculator, I would have to be very careful that I'm lining up the decimal points because that's how we do decimals, right? When we're adding, subtracting. But I do have a calculator. So I'm not saying don't be careful. I'm just saying that it's not like a huge deal if it wasn't lined up perfectly, because what you're going to type into your calculator is what Taylor's typing in, 1.7 plus 3.8. You're supposed to grab one. Natalie's going to type it in. What is 1.7 plus 3.8? Who says 11 over 2?
Oh.
Bring yours up here.
5. Mine's 5 over 1.5. It's 5 1.5.
5.5. Thank you. If your calculator is saying 11 over 2, I need you to bring it up to me. Calvin?
What did you do?
I changed it back to decimals.
Oh.
Welcome. Okay. Shh. Hey, sip them. Now try it again, please. 1.7 plus 3.8. Try it again and see if it says 5.5 this time.
Is there zero? Still.
That's just because there's always a zero. That tells you it's ready to go.
Oh.
5.5, okay. Hey, what did I say? I said I was recording. And I said no side conversations. We have not done a very good job with that. Makes it very hard to hear. So copy down the G, copy down the inequality symbol, and then, Aaliyah, sorry. Aaliyah, I'm going to give you another chance here. With the equal bar underneath our sign, does that mean we want to use an open or closed circle? Closed. Whitney, oh, I said Whitney, sorry. I wanted to call on you, and then I reminded myself I was talking to Aaliyah. Aaliyah, where would I find 5.5 on this number line? Between what two numbers? Good. So closed circle, there's 5.5. 5.5 is right between them. And then Aaliyah, one more question. Is G bigger or smaller? Yes, thank you, Aaliyah. It's smaller, so I'm going to shade to the left. Yes. I kind of feel like calling on you for this next one. This next one uses fractions. Now, depending on the calculator you have, it may not be very useful with fractions, and that's okay. It doesn't hurt to go over those rules again. The H is on the right side of the inequality. So Whitney, tell me which number I want to get rid of in order to get H by itself. What's the opposite of positive 1/2? Okay, so we are going to subtract 1/2 from both sides. When I do that, H is now by itself. The inequality symbols copied down. And I need to go off to the side here. And I need to make sure I find a common denominator when I'm working with fractions, if I'm adding and subtracting them. Gage, what is our common denominator? So I've got -3/4. And then when I times this fraction by what, Gage? 2. That's going to give me a new fraction of -2/4. It's actually the same fraction, but changed so it's got the same denominator. If I told you I was combining -3/4 and -2/4, would you tell me that I would join forces or go to war? Join forces. So -3 and -2 make -5. So my answer is -5/4. Did you write -3/4 and -2/4? Yeah. Some calculators don't do fractions. Most don't do fractions, actually. Okay. So your calculator might, but I'm not going to sit here and try to explain how everyone's calculator does fractions. It's easy for me just to tell you, hey, remember when we found common denominators? Do it again. Now, when it comes to graphing, what is our number line counting by? Fourths. It's got it. If you count between 0 and 1, there's 4 marks, right? Starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It is counting by fourths. I want to count on the negative side of the number line, and I want to count 5/4. So this is -1/4. What's this one? -2/4. What's this one? -3/4. This one's -4/4 or -1. What's this one? -5/4 or -1 1/4, right? Both of them are the same. So do I put an open or closed circle there? Open. Is H bigger or smaller? Bigger. Shade to the right. Natalie, explain to me how you knew that H was bigger. The inequality symbol. The sign.
Yeah.
Hey, don't talk to her while she's talking to me. And it's opening up, it's eating that variable, right? It means it's bigger. Yeah. If the sign's not eating the variable, that would mean that it's small. Good. All right, last question. A person can be no taller than 6.25 feet to become an astronaut pilot for NASA. Why do you think NASA has a height requirement for their space pilots? What do you think, Alexis? Yeah, it's not a very big, I mean, you're launching into space, right? So it's not going to be super big. So you can't be any taller than 6.25 feet to become an astronaut pilot. Your friend is 5 feet 9 inches. Write and solve an inequality that represents how much your friend could still grow, still qualify to be a pilot. So they've given us this number here in decimal form. What we need to do is write this number here also in decimal form. What's the decimal form of 5 feet 9 inches? Gage? No. Gage? Nope. Hunter? Nope. Colin? Nope. Helena? Negative. That would mean someone's in the ground. Hopefully that doesn't happen after a NASA flight. They don't put you to rest, right? Now, what the issue I'm seeing here is that we're kind of referring to these, we're using decimals, right? I'm getting a lot of 9s. There isn't going to be a 9 in your answer at all. That's because 5 feet 9 inches is not 5.9 because decimals are out of 10. Deci or deca means 10. But how many inches are in a foot? Oh, whoa, 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 hands down. Answer my question. How many inches are in a foot?
12.
So it's not out of 10, is it? It's out of 12. There are 12 inches in a foot. So 5 feet 9 inches is 5 feet or 5 9/12 feet, I should say, because that extra 9 inches isn't quite a full foot, but it's pretty close. Natalie.
Then if it's December,
Yep.
why is December?
I don't think that has anything to do with the month. Okay. And maybe it did at one point, maybe in some calendar that was originally written, there was only 10 months. I don't really know, but mathematically speaking, deca means 10. Good question though, because you're right, December is DEC, so. Yeah, Gage?
The answer is 5.75.
Thank you. Yes. So 5 9/12 actually reduces to 5 3/4. And Gage, tell us again what decimal 3/4 is. That's right. So if someone's 5 feet 9 inches, that means they're 5.75 feet. Now, if I've forgotten how to turn a fraction into a decimal, remind me that. How do I do that again, Gage? Isn't it really easy when you have a calculator to do top divided by bottom? Everyone right now in your calculator, I want you to do 3 divided by 4. 3 divided by 4, turning 3/4 into a decimal. Do you get 0.75?
Yeah.
Okay, Engage is right. That's 0.75. Now let's write our inequality. What variable or what letter for a variable do you guys want to use that shows how much your friend will grow? F? Okay. F for friend? Okay. We've already decided. You're too late. So what's the current height of our friend? 5.75. And if they grow, are we going to add or subtract that to their current height? If they grow. Okay, but we're not to that point yet. We have to write the inequality down. So 5.75 plus the amount our friend's going to grow. That expression represents what their height can be. According to the NASA restrictions, they can't be any taller than 6.25. So can their height be greater than 6.25? Has to be less than. Can it be equal to? Yes, it can be equal to 6.25. And there we have the inequality. From there, Natalie, we could then subtract 5.75, but only after we've gone ahead and written the inequality down. So I am going to subtract 5.75 from both sides. That way we can get F by itself. You can use your calculator for this. You may not even need to. What is 625 minus 575? 0.5, right? So 0.5, make sure you copy the symbol down. And when we're talking about story problems, we need labels. And when I say label, I don't mean just put the F there. What did the F stand for? Yeah, but Half a friend, is that what we were talking about? We were talking about his height, our friend's height, and what were we measuring our friend's height in? Feet. Okay, so F is, which F represents the height that our friend can grow. As long as our friend grows less than or equal to 0.5 feet, they'll be able to be the pilot. Now, how many inches is half a foot? It's 6 inches. Okay, so they have another, as long as they don't grow more than 6 inches, they'd still be able to be a pilot. Now, they have this height restriction at NASA, but 6.25 is actually still pretty tall. 0.25 is 1/4 of a foot, right? 0.25 is 1/4, like a quarter. So if you take a foot, 12 inches, and divide it by 4, what's 12 divided by 4? 3. So 1/4 of a foot is 3 inches. So this person here is 6 foot 3 inches. That's still pretty tall. It's taller than I am, 3 inches taller than I am. Okay, so that's still quite, I mean, it's not like they're just requiring very short people. It's just that you can't be an NBA basketball player. Sorry, they're not going to the moon. Now, what I want you guys to do, because we have 10 minutes left, I want you to get a work paper for 4.2. Put your name on this work paper, title it 4.2, and your very first problem for 4.2 is number 3. I can pull it up right now. And I want you to write down and start solving. Remember, you don't have to write any of the graphs on your work paper, but you do have to solve them and write your answers. Get started.